Good day, everyone. Today we will be doing a very short overview of the British revolutions, how they address Britain's weaknesses, some reasons why you might want to choose a particular revolution, and what each revolution can do for you. Now, two of the main weaknesses we see with Britain are its weak points in comparison to other European civilizations. For example, the British don't have any true gunpowder skirmisher infantry, and they lack the heavy cavalry of the French like the cuirassier. So we'll start off the list by looking at the American Revolution. The American Revolution is one of those revolutions where once you revolt, you get your revolutionaries, which act as a midpoint between a musketeer and a traditional European skirmisher, so that already helps to improve Britain's deficit of gunpowder skirmisher type units. On top of that, you also get Gatling guns to complement your rockets, and Gatling guns help to create a anti-infantry screen in front of your rockets and do a great job of thinning down late-game infantry swarms. The American Revolution also puts increased focus on the use of forts, which it can send infinitely like many other revolutions. Every time that you build a fort, you get 2 Gatlings, and on top of that, after you send a card, you'll also get 4 sharpshooters with every single fort built. This focus on skirmisher units is further exemplified by a card that lets you train Minutemen from your forts. You can call up a small army of skirmishers at the drop of a hat. You also get cowboys, a kind of weak dragoon unit that costs only food, that can actually harvest food from livestock, which means that you've been going for a food-heavy economy for a British musket spam, then you'll already be well prepared for cowboy production. And since they don't cost any gold, it also means that you can put more of that gold towards your muskets. Or your rangers if you've sent the new rangers card. You also gain access to 2 skirmisher-like native units, the Klamath Riflemen, as well as the Sharktooth Bowmen, who are both quite effective against light infantry, just like your sharpshooters and your Minutemen and your revolutionaries. You also get the Cheyenne Rider, which counters cavalry well in melee, as well as your Comanche Horse Archer, which instead counters cavalry from range, just like your dragoons or cowboys. The average British player is used to just making a ton of muskets with maybe a few falconets to back them up. That is why the American Revolution is such a good fit for that kind of British player, because it adds the right kind of variety, giving you trainable revolutionaries that cost only food, giving you super cheap native units like the Klamath Riflemen and the Sharktooth Bowmen that only cost food and wood, no gold cost at all, plus the Cheyenne Rider and the Comanche Horse Archer, which counter cavalry on the cheap and pair nicely with cowboys, which only cost food and counter cavalry on the cheap. In other words, the American Revolution gives you cheap ways to help round out a musketeer-heavy army, giving you skirmishers that don't cost any gold so that they won't interfere with your musketeer production, as well as dragoon options that also don't cost any gold, so they likewise won't interfere nearly as much with your dragoon and your falconet production. You can make Gatlings, which do cost gold if you want, or you could instead wait to get 2 free Gatlings once you send your fort card, on top of 4 sharpshooters if you've already sent the card that gives you 4 sharpshooters with every fort. So while the American Revolution might not solve the heavy cavalry deficit of the British, it does definitely solve their deficit when it comes to ranged gunpowder skirmishers. No need to send Jaegers, you can have free sharpshooters once you send that card with every fort you build, while also having several cheap dragoon options to help protect your falconets and your brand new skirmishers. That was the British. Now let's take a look at the Canadian Revolution. The Canadian Revolution differs from the American Revolution in several key ways. With the British Canadian Revolution, they tend to move more towards working with Native American allies, as well as keeping a running economy, so you won't have that short stutter like you'd see with the American Revolution, because all of their villagers don't turn into revolutionaries. Instead, their villagers simply gain a higher ranged attack and continue to do their thing. Well, the British American Revolution focuses more on a wide gamut of skirmisher type units and goon type units. The Canadian Revolution instead gives you the option to send Highlanders, who are basically super musketeers, who can help to reinforce your musketeer line due to their high HP, and also you happen to receive native units that are very good at sieging down buildings, such as, say, the Nootka Clubmen, as well as the tanky high-range resist Huron Mantlets. Those Mantlets do a great job protecting low HP units like skirmishers from ranged fire, soaking up those ranged attacks with ease. So instead of leaning into a goon and skirm combo like the Americans, the Canadian Revolution tends to go towards a more infantry-focused blob style of play. You run mantlets and your nuka move at about the same speed as infantry, same as your Highlanders. Also, your Cree Riflemen, which you also get with the Canadian Revolution, and the Cherokee Riflemen also move as fast as infantry. So almost all of the units that you get for this revolution move at the same speed, so it's very easy to move them all together in one blob without having to worry about how their different mobility or different characteristics will affect the formation. There's no need to pull off Cheyenne Riders or Comanche Bowmen so that they can make better use of their mobility away from the infantry. Instead, you can pretty much mass up your Canadian force as a giant death ball using your bears to help soak up a lot of damage. But if you can put down more trading posts on native settlements and you can get more native units from said trading posts, then your death ball can just get bigger and bigger and bigger till it turns into a truly monstrous mass. That's the key difference between the Canadians and the Americans, is with the Canadian Revolution, you just create giant death balls with native units backed up by musketeers, highlanders, and cannons to completely steamroll the enemy. Well, the Revolution does give you Cherokee Riflemen and Cree Riflemen. Those two types of gunpowder-like skirmishers aren't quite enough to plug in that huge gap within your own roster of not having any kind of gunpowder skirmisher that you can produce in mass, and also they don't give you heavy cavalry. So in conclusion, the Canadian Revolution doesn't fulfill either of the two large gaps in Britain's roster, but it instead gives you a giant mass that you can use to hammer the enemy, which is definitely worth something. Next up, we will take a look at the South African Revolution, which is odd as far as revolutions go because it doesn't give you any military units to speak of. And just like the French-Canadian Revolution, it doesn't give you revolutionaries. Instead, the focus of this revolution is placed squarely upon the player's economy, with one card that sends livestock, another card that ships a 100,000 coin diamond mine, a card that lets you build 30 Cours de Bois on top of your normal villagers, and a card that lets you send a third factory. You also receive trek wagons, which can let you transport villagers through dangerous territory to drop them off over at coin mines or hunts that haven't been accessed yet. The only South African card that directly helps out your military would be the Wanderlust card, where every time it's sent, it increases the HP of all of your land units by 5%. This card is especially useful for your hand infantry, who greatly benefit from the added HP because it lets them soak up more damage. It also helps out your artillery, who can now win more artillery duels if they encounter rival falconets or similar artillery of that type. So the Wanderlust card, once it's sent enough, acts almost as a replacement for the Imperial upgrade cards you would get for your land units. To be honest, this revolution acts less like a revolution and more like an alternative Imperial Age choice. Last but not least, your fourth revolution option is Egypt. Now, Egypt is an interesting beast because it fulfills both of the holes inside of your roster, because it lets you build Mamelukes, and also, once you send the right card, it also lets you build Nizam Fusiliers, who act as gunpowder skirmishers when they're in their normal stance. So you can build as many gunpowder skirmishers as you want from forts if you choose Egypt. When you revolt as Egypt, all of your villagers will turn into revolutionaries. However, Egypt helps you reboom after this point, because in addition to the citizenship card, they also have two economics cards that will help you reboom, such as Flood of the Nile or Suez Canal. So as far as revolutions go, Egypt is a very balanced revolution. On top of that, it also fills in both of the weaknesses in the British roster, giving you heavy cavalry through the creation of Mamelukes, as well as giving you the option to train Nizam Fusiliers from your fort once you get the right card. So you can have trainable gunpowder skirmishers, thereby making it one of the best options when it comes to British revolutions. At the end of the day, though, which revolution you pick is a very personal choice. And whichever revolution you choose, I wish you nothing but the best of luck in all of your endeavors. So go out there and have fun, everyone. Whatever weird strategy you want to try out with the British revolutions, go for it.